Been a while, huh, boys and girls? Welcome back to Project Pocket Monster Rebalancing Johto Pokemon. This series, we go through and we rebalance Pokemon who have been underutilized and neglected by Game Freak over the last 20 years or so of power creep. If you don't know what power creep is, it's basically when new utilities or abilities are introduced that make old ones outclassed and basically irrelevant in the metagame. So, our job here is to tweak these Pokemon by giving them better movesets, better stats, maybe even different typings, different abilities, in order to carve out a niche in the current competitive metagame. When we go through and we rebalance these Pokemon, there are a number of assumptions that we have to make. Now here's the thing too, it's been a couple weeks, but I edited a very nice little short that explains all of these assumptions, so I don't have to go through and record it every time. But if you already know these assumptions that we're working with when we go through and we rebalance these Pokemon, you can skip to this time right here and get yourself on with the rebalancing. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy. So first things first, we're not changing the type chart or type matchups. That means that fire is still super effective against grass, grass is still super effective against rock, and rock is still super effective against ice. All of that in vanilla Pokemon remains consistent in our rebalancing. We're not changing the effects of abilities. Instead, we're going to opt to change worse abilities for better abilities that still fit the Pokemon thematically. We're not going to change the base power, power points, or accuracy of any moves. That means we're not going to be giving something like Fire Spin 80 base power, Dynamic Punch 20 PP, or making Blizzard an 100% accurate move. All the moves are going to stay consistent as they are in vanilla Pokemon. Now this is the most important assumption, is that these changes that we make have to fit thematically. So we're not going to be giving something like Quagsire the move Sacred Fire. Sure, it would be funny, but it doesn't make any sense. We're also not going to be giving a Pokemon like Charizard an ability like Storm Drain, because that just doesn't line up with what Charizard is, or how he's ever functioned in any games or lore. Now, keep in mind, guys, this is also a meta without Mega Evolution, Z-moves, or Dynamaxing / Gigantamaxing, so we're not going to be creating Mega Evolutions, creating custom Z-moves, nor including Dynamaxing / Gigantamaxing in our rebalancing. It is just the base Pokemon. So remember, guys, if you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get started. Oh man, okay, so Noctowl. Well, Noctowl is your classic normal flying type, early route bird. Noctowl has never really been a phenomenal Pokemon. Yeah, 100 base HP, 96 base def is pretty decent on the special side, but it's not really exactly up to par physically. Noctowl is also not the fastest Pokemon in the entire world. There are definitely things that Noctowl has going for it, most notably Insomnia and Tinted Lenses are two pretty decent abilities, but Noctowl's stats, they're not super great. It's kind of frail, it's kind of slow. Especially when you compare it to other normal flying types. Even Pokemon like Unfezant are probably better. Off the top of my head, Swellow, Staraptor, maybe even Pidgeot are better than Noctowl. So there has to be some way for us to be able to differentiate Noctowl, a normal flying type, from the vast majority of other normal flying types that we've seen in the Pokemon franchise. And to do that, I'm proposing a few changes. Well, the first and biggest change that we're going to be making to Noctowl is actually that we're going to be giving Noctowl a dark primary type. Now, yes, I know, usually when people rebalance Noctowl or change Noctowl up, usually they consider Noctowl to be more like a psychic type Pokemon, but I don't necessarily understand that. I get that he needs to not be a normal type Pokemon. I think Psychic Flying does himself a lot of favors, but I think the dark actually fits a little bit better thematically. Now, why is that? Well, in certain parts of Alola, Noctowl is called the Emperor of the Night. On top of that, it's based on an owl, which is a nocturnal creature. And if you look at the rings around its eye, I think that Noctowl sort of works as a dark flying type, a little bit better than a psychic flying type. You look at Pokemon like Sigilyph and Xatu, and they're a little bit more like mystical and colorful than Noctowl is. So by giving Noctowl a dark flying type, we're actually able to separate Noctowl from a large majority of the other normal flying types, as well as have it function differently as a dark flying type than other dark flying types that we currently know, being Galarian Moltres, Honchkrow, and Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz is a little bit more physically defensive, Galarian Moltres is a special attacker, and Honchkrow is a physical attacker, so Noctowl being a dark flying sort of specially defender support Pokemon, I think really fits it, as well as makes a unique niche for it. So as far as its stats go, I want to give 5 points to its defense, 5 points to its special attack, as well as 10 more points to its special defense, bringing its stat total up 20 points to 472. Pretty modest, but the additional defense lets Noctowl actually take a hit a little bit better. Special attack means that it's going to be able to hit a slightly bit harder, as well as the extra 10 into SPDEF means that Noctowl is sitting at 106 on the SPDEF side, which is actually pretty respectable when you think about it. It's better than most mythical Pokemon, base 100 across the board. As far as its abilities go, Insomnia is a pretty good ability. It gives Noctowl the ability to switch into Spore, Sleep Powder, Hypnosis, if you're really being cheeky, Dark Void. Keen Eye obviously is very trash, and Tinted Lenses is phenomenal as well. So I think what we're going to do is we're actually just going to get rid of Keen Eye for Infiltrator. Now, why does Infiltrator make sense? Well, Noctowl, as the name implies, is based on an owl, and owls are known for their special feathers that actually let them move silently through the air, sneak up on prey, late at night, and I think that Infiltrator actually fits Noctowl very thematically as an owl. That means that Noctowl has the option of, hitting Pokemon through Substitute, hitting Pokemon through screens, kind of ignoring those different setup things that the opponent has, can be really, really beneficial toward it. Now let's talk about Noctowl's move pool. As far as Noctowl's moveset goes, I wanted to give it access to a number of different dark type special attacking moves to complement its new dark typing, as well as boosted special attack. For instance, Dark Pulse, Power Trip, and Zoroark's signature move of Night Daze. If you guys don't know what Night Daze is, it's 85 base power, 95 accuracy, as well as a 40% chance to lower an opponent's accuracy. I think that's pretty interesting to give to Noctowl. And I also wanted to give Noctowl access to Brave Bird, because many other birds actually have Brave Bird, and I kind of think it's silly that, especially Pokemon that, aren't necessarily flying types, like Blaziken or Surfetch or something like that, they have access to Brave Bird. I think it makes perfect sense for Noctowl to also have access to Brave Bird. Coverage, I want to give Noctowl access to Mist Ball as well as Icy Wind. Icy Wind, to me, makes sense. It's kind of a creepy, dark type, flying type, should be able to spread the cold night air, as well as gives it access to a decent coverage move that might allow it to outspeed on a second turn. And I also wanted to give Noctowl access to Topsy Turvy and Haze. Now, these tools give Noctowl the ability to either reverse an opponent's setting up or just completely eliminate the opponent's setup. Now, with all these tools Noctowl has now, there are a number of different sets that you're pretty much able to run. You can run an Insomnia set if you want to be able to switch into, Spores or Hypnosises, if that's something that you're worried about. It's a pretty decent grass type check, especially considering the fact that it is now specially defensive, or at least a little bit more specially defensive, as well as can hit a little bit harder with its flying type stabs. If you want to be able to hit past Substitute as well as screens, if you want to be able to come in with, a Defog with a Booty set, as well as, Roost, Dark Pulse, and maybe even Icy Wind or something like that, you're obviously more than welcome to. If you want to run a Tinted Lenses set, if you want to go for a Choice Specs, Hurricane set, 91 base special attack is a pretty decent amount better than 86. You can run an Assault Vest set with Noctowl as well. You can run Icy Wind, Heat Wave, Hurricane, Dark Pulse. You could run, even if you wanted to, a physical set. I don't know why you would. Its base physical attack is only 50. But if you wanted to, now you can. You have the actual stab in Brave Bird now. Overall, I think Noctowl really only needed to have its type changed, as well as access to a couple of different tools. I think that with these changes, Noctowl's actually maybe not overwhelming, but still much better than it previously was. Specifically, Tinted Lenses, dark type attacks, as well as flying type attacks, means that nothing's really going to be able to switch in cleanly. And on top of that, if you're running an Assault Vest, it means that you can basically take super effective electric or ice type hits, and you can fire back with some stabs and maybe even net yourself a kill you might not have been able to get otherwise. Give me one second. Now, before I talk about Ledian, I want you guys to know that Ledian is the entire reason that this project even exists in the first place. Ledian is to thank for this series, because it is absolutely absurd to me as a player that a Pokemon like Ledian can exist in the same game as a Pokemon like Mega Metagross or Kartana or Zacian. Ledian is so pitifully bad that I felt it right to not only go through and buff Ledian, I felt it right to change up pretty much the entire game. Ledian is the reason that Project Pocket Monster exists, And now is the time for us to do our little ladybug friend a little bit of justice. So let's talk about how bad Ledian is, okay? Starting right off the bat, Early Bird, bad ability. Iron Fist is a very good ability on a very, very bad Pokemon. Base 35 attack stat is just like, it's worse than some base Pokemon. It's like a third of what Trapinches is as a base. It's got 50 defense, it's got 55 special attack. Its only decent stats are its Spadef and its speed. 110 Spadef is actually pretty solid, but complemented by 55 HP means that Ledian's still not going to be able to take a hit. It's still weak versus fire, ice, electric, and still takes a lot of neutral damage from psychic, dark, etc. 85 speed is also pretty alright. But it's not really doing Ledian any favors. Ledian's got a base stat total of 390, and that's mostly due to the fact that its Spadef basically carries its entire stat total. But Ledian, it's 4 times weak to rocks. It cannot hit hard on either side. It doesn't have really any good abilities. Iron Fist doesn't benefit it at all. Ledian needs to be altered very, very heavily in order for it to even come close to having a niche in the current competitive meta. Ledian, I got you. So, what are we going to do to buff Ledian? Well, normally I don't like going through and changing a bunch of Pokemon's types. Johto has not seen that so far. I've changed 3 Pokemon's types at this point, and we're going to be changing a 4th Pokemon's type with Ledian. So, Ledian used to be a bug flying type, now I want to make Ledian a bug fighting type. Now, this makes sense. Ledian has always been known for its sort of punching ability, as well as bug fighting being a much, much better type than bug flying. Bug fighting means that you're only taking neutral damage from Stealth Rock instead of 4 times X damage, as well as it's overall better. The stab combination's better, and I think that Ledian really needed a little bit of help. I think it sort of fits thematically and honestly separates Ledian from a lot of other bug flying types that we've seen in the past. As far as its stats go, I want to give Ledian 20 points to its HP, 50 points to its attack stat, 10 to its defense, but we're going to subtract 20 points from its special attack stat. We're leaving its Spadef and its speed the exact same. This brings Ledian to a base stat total of 450, which is equal to what we made Butterfree as well as Beedrill. I think that these early route bugs should have a pretty similar base stat total. So right off the bat, obviously, 75 HP, 20 more points to it really, really helps Ledian. It goes a long way to letting Ledian maybe take a hit on the special side. It still probably can't really take a hit on the physical side, but 10 more points to its defense is going to help it take at least maybe a resisted hit, a little bit better, maybe a knockoff, maybe a grass type hit. I don't know. Ledian's so bad, dude. I need to take a second because Ledian's so bad. Hold on. Ledian may be able to take a hit now with slightly boosted defenses. The biggest thing that we're doing is we're basically neutering Ledian's special attack. It was 55, now it's 35. Is it really going to make a big difference? No. Is 85 base attack over 35 going to make a big difference? Probably not, but it actually allows Ledian to maybe hit something for decent damage. Even Ledian with super effective moves was hardly doing anything to the Pokemon it supposedly should be doing well against. But 85 base attack coming off a bug fighting typing is pretty decent. Now, what we're going to do for Ledian is we're actually going to be giving Ledian a couple of different abilities, a couple of very unique abilities actually, that actually fit Ledian very, very thematically. I think that Swarm is kind of the go-to bug type ability that Game Freak loved to hand out to bug types. Pretty much every bug type in Generation 3, it got Swarm in some scenario. Early Bird as well. Early Bird's not a very good ability, but we're going to be keeping Iron Fist. I'm actually going to change out Swarm for Power Spot. But Power Spot basically gives your teammate a free Life Orb boost. It increases your teammate's attack by 30%. This gives Ledian kind of a niche in doubles. Now we're going through and we're rebalancing Pokemon for a singles metagame. But just look at Ledian. I had to come up with something to make it a little bit unique. Maybe Ledian can be used in doubles as a screens power spot Pokemon. I don't know, maybe. We're also going to be giving Ledian a Victory Star. The spots on its back are referred to as stars. It's known as the 5-star Pokemon. So I thought that it would be interesting to give Ledian a Victory Star, which basically just increases its accuracy of its moves. And I'm going to keep Iron Fist because Iron Fist itself is a pretty good ability. It was just kind of underutilized on Ledian due to its absolutely abysmal attack stat. That all being said, I'm trying to give Ledian not only maybe a niche in singles, which it probably already doesn't have, I'm trying to give Ledian a little bit of use maybe in doubles, solely off the fact that it has this Life Orb gifting capability to its teammate, as well as setup moves in Reflect and Light Screen, as well as U-Turn to maybe help him out even a little bit further with some pivoting. As far as Ledian's moves go, I'm going to let the floodgates open. Ledian, I'm giving you everything. You need a lot of tools. Here we go. As far as stab moves, I want to give Ledian access to Skitter Smack, Cross Chop, Reversal, Flying Press, Close Combat, and Power Up Punch. I want to give Ledian access to coverage moves of Shadow Punch, Play Rough, Steel Wing, and Dual Wing Beat. And I also want to give Ledian just an absolute crazy number of setup and support moves. Quick Guard, Coaching, Bulk Up, Helping Hand, Follow Me, Wish, Heal Bell, Me First, Ally Switch, Switcheroo, and Moonlight. So, let's talk about these moves in some sort of organized fashion. Well, Skitter Smack, it's a move introduced in Generation 8. I don't believe Ledian is in Generation 8, so it makes sense for Ledian to just be able to have this bug-type move that lowers an opponent's special attack by 1 stage. All these fighting type moves are just because Ledian previously did not have access to them. Maybe a Close Combat or a Flying Press will help Ledian in some way. An accurate Cross Chop as well with a high critical hit chance coming off of a Victory Star gives Ledian an option to maybe have a little bit more power without the trade-off of maybe lowering its defenses. Helps Ledian out a little bit. Flying Press having flying type damage as well. It's a unique tool. As far as the coverage moves, I wanted to give it Shadow Punch, Dual Wing Beat again. It's a Generation 8 move that Ledian doesn't have access to because it's not in Generation 8. Shadow Punch is basically just to be boosted by Iron Fist, as well as allow it to hit Psychic types, as well as maybe Ghost types for super effective damage. Play Rough, I think it's cute because Ledian's fists are described as piddly little hits. So I thought that Play Rough was kind of a cute thing to maybe give Ledian, as well as Steel Wing to maybe allow it to hit fairy types that might otherwise be able to wall its fighting type attacks. Setup and support, again, we were talking about how Ledian needs some sort of niche, even if it's not in singles. In doubles, I want Ledian to be able to maybe use Coaching to, increase its teammates' attack stat, as well as a Life Orb boost, as well as maybe a Helping Hand boost, as well as maybe support options and Follow Me, Me First, Ally Switch, that sort of thing. It gives Ledian the ability to support its team. Switcheroo means, especially in singles as well, if you're running a Choice Scarf for whatever reason, you can trick the opponent. I believe not many fighting types get access to Trick nor Switcheroo, so this again gives Ledian a little bit of a niche over other Pokemon. Moonlight as well gives Ledian access to reliable recovery. And even though Ledian's probably not going to be walling anything or to the point where it's able to recover, it still gives Ledian the ability to do so if it needs to. I think that all of these tools might not make or break Ledian, but at least makes him a usable Pokemon, as well as have a couple of different interesting options and niches over other Pokemon, most notably an accurate Cross Chop, access to Flying Press, a number of different coverage moves, as well as some options to support its teammates in doubles. So Ledian previously was known as just a screens user that was just set up screens, U-turn, or just die. It can't even hit anything for super effective damage, really. Now Ledian has access to not only these screen moves, it can maybe heal itself up, it can actually maybe even set up with Power Up Punch, be able to maybe actually take a Pokemon down with access to Cross Chop and U-turn. I think that these things make Ledian a very interesting Pokemon, as well as one of the only bug fighting types that kind of functions more as a support Pokemon rather than a complete wall breaker or defensive Pokemon like a Buzzwole or a Heracross. Ledian, I did my best, man. I really did. The tools are in your hands now. You just gotta do it, man. You just gotta let people know you're not useless anymore. All right. So Ariados. Ariados is not nearly as bad as its counterpart in Ledian. Actually, Ariados has had access to a number of different tools that have set itself apart from other Pokemon, most notably Sticky Web, Spider Web, Toxic Thread, as well as access to Toxic Spikes. It makes Ariados, a pretty decent lead on certain teams, but overall, Ariados is pretty underwhelming. 90 base attack is great and all, but 40 base speed and 70 defenses across the board really aren't going to be doing it any favors. So I think there are a number of things we can do to Ariados to actually improve it. Ariados previously, it's really only a suicide lead. I think it does that pretty well, but I'd like to be able to have Ariados do that even better. So I want to give Ariados 15 points into its attack stat. subtract 20 points from its special attack stat, as well as give 55 points to its speed stat. This lets it be faster, it lets it hit harder, as well as maybe get its hazards up first. So not only can it get its hazards up, it can maybe then attack the next turn if it's brought down to its focus sash, that sort of thing. But what really makes Ariados interesting in this rebalanced version of him is actually the abilities that we're going to be giving it. So, right off the bat, Swarm, it's an ability that we've previously seen Ariados have. Pretty much all bug types in Generation 3 were gifted the ability Swarm, but I think that it would be really, really interesting to give Ariados a couple of newer abilities, a couple Gen 7 abilities to make it kind of stand out from its competition. So I want to get rid of Insomnia for Merciless. What Merciless is it basically allows Ariados to always land a critical hit on a poisoned Pokemon. If you're running Toxic Thread, if you're running Toxic for whatever reason, if you're, you set up some Toxic Spikes, you come back in, all of a sudden you're able to crit this Pokemon that you wouldn't have otherwise maybe been able to kill, doing, 1.5 times the amount of damage is really, really helpful for Ariados, as well as, I think, the most interesting ability in Emergency Exit. Now, Emergency Exit, where does that come from? Well, in the Pokedex entries, it basically says that Ariados has a web that it ties back to its nest as it goes out and it hunts for prey. So basically, Ariados, if it's in any trouble, it can just kind of yank on that expelled web and launch itself all the way back to its nest into safety. So I thought that was a pretty interesting sort of ability for a Pokemon like Ariados to have, especially one who notably is, an entry hazard setter. So Ariados can maybe, set up sticky webs, and then if it gets hit down to either a Focus Sash or below half health, all of a sudden then Ariados is going to switch out and bring something in to immediately capitalize off of those sticky webs, off of those Toxic Spikes. I think that it makes Ariados really, really interesting as far as a either suicide lead or having the ability to maybe come back in later on in the match, and if the opponent happens to Rapid Spin or defog those hazards away, it lets Ariados be an active team member, and instead of dying right off the bat, coming back in, especially with a boosted speed, and being able to set up those hazards maybe again if they're brushed away, maybe a second layer of Toxic Spikes, or maybe resetting webs if they'd already been defogged. I think that gives Ariados actually a decent niche over other sticky web users. Obviously, Araquanid and Galvantula are the two premier sticky web users at this point in time. Araquanid hits really hard with water type stab. Galvantula, he pretty much hits hard with electric stab, as well as having access to Volt Switch. I think it makes sense for Ariados to have this sort of pseudo pivot mechanic, as well as capitalizing off of poison as a bug poison type. As far as the moves that I want to give Ariados, I want to give Ariados access to U-Turn, Skitter Smack, Fury Cutter, Poison Fang, and Gunk Shot. I think it's kind of ridiculous that Ariados already didn't get U-Turn. Skitter Smack, again, Generation 8. Ariados is not in Generation 8. Fury Cutter as well. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Ariados is, it's been a physically attacking bug type. I'm surprised when Fury Cutter was introduced in Generation 3 it wasn't given to Ariados, but I digress. Poison Fang, it literally has fangs. To me, it makes sense. And Gunk Shot gives Ariados a, stronger poison type attack. As far as coverage moves, I really only want to give it access to a couple of dark type moves. I want to give it access to Jaw Lock, again, the signature move of Dreadnought. Jaw Lock basically locks a Pokemon in place with you. It doesn't do any damage over time, but it's basically like a mean look as well as a crunch at the same time. And I want to give Ariados access to Knockoff in case it has a favorable matchup. Right at the beginning of the match, if it decides to lead, it can opt to instead knock off something instead of maybe sticky webs or toxic spiking. I think it gives Ariados a nice little option as a support Pokemon. And I also want to give Ariados access to Mean Look. You probably wouldn't run Mean Look over something like Spiderweb. It's kind of a little redundant, but I figured I'd give it to Ariados anyway. Now, all these tools and more give Ariados the ability to not only set up hazards once throughout a match, but also maybe twice throughout a match, as well as having access to pivoting, a couple different stab moves, different options to choose from in Skitter Smack and Gunk Shot, as well as a conjunction of Poison Fang with Merciless. Maybe you can run a knockoff set, a knockoff U-Turn, Webs, and Toxic Spikes. You could run Gunk Shot, U-Turn, X-Scissor knockoff with an Assault Vest. There's a whole bunch of things that Ariados can do now, especially with access to 95 base speed and 105 base attack. Really lets Ariados not only hit harder, the ability to pivot with Emergency Exit or U-Turn, allow it to stick around throughout a match, maybe get hazards up once or twice throughout the match, as well as actually make Ariados a useful Pokemon on your competitive team. Which brings us to Crobat, and Crobat is one of those Pokemon that I will not be touching at all. Crobat is absolutely incredible. 130 base speed, as well as access to 90 base attack, even 70 base special attack. It seems like it's very low, but you can run Crobat literally pretty much however you want. You can have it be a defensive pivot, you can have it be an offensive pivot, you can have it be a physical monster with Brave Bird, with Cross Poison, U-Turn. You can have it be a setup special attacker with Nasty Plot, Heat Wave, Giga Drain. As well as maybe you can have it even be a support Pokemon with either Tailwind, Defog, especially with heavy duty booties means Crobat is actually a lot better. But at the same time, Poison Flying, it's very unique. Inner Focus means it can't be intimidated, as well as can't be flinched, so it makes it a decent lead already. Infiltrator lets it hit through screens, as well as Substitute. Crobat just has so many different options going for it, and you can basically just pick and choose how you would like to build Crobat for your team. Crobat's always going to be a really, really good option for your team, and I honestly, I don't think I need to touch Crobat, even in the slightest. I think it's a fantastic Pokemon, always has been, and always will be. Which brings us to the original Rotom Wash, being Lanturn. And now I know that's kind of an overstatement. Lanturn has obviously never been as good as Rotom Wash, but it does have the Water Electric typing, which is actually a pretty decent typing defensively. Lanturn has pretty decent HP, but that's pretty much all that it has going for it. Its defense isn't great, but 125 HP combined with 76 SPDEF means that Lanturn is actually pretty bulky on the special side. It can take a couple of super effective hits. It's never really going to want to take an Earthquake unless it has an Air Balloon or a Shuck Berry. But Lanturn's actually a pretty decent Pokemon. Access to Water Absorb and Volt Absorb specifically let it basically pick and choose what it might want to be able to counter. It can counter, special attacking water types, or it can counter Pokemon who, might want to Volt Switch in Lanturn's face, get a little bit of reliable recovery back, that sort of thing. So there's not much that I want to do to Lanturn. I think that Lanturn's actually kind of underrated as a Pokemon, as a defensive pivot, but there's definitely some things I think we can do to improve Lanturn. So right off the bat, I actually want to give Lanturn a little bit more HP. I know it might seem silly to buff the stat that Lanturn has that's already the highest, but I want to give 10 more points to Lanturn's HP stat. Lets it take physical hits a little bit better, lets it take special hits a little bit better. Basically just giving a Pokemon stats will make it better in some sense, and I think that increasing Lanturn's HP capacity, as well as, letting it take more hits, just in turn makes it better. And I also wanted to give Lanturn 10 points to its special attack. Its special attack being 76 was never anything that was phenomenal, but 86 is a little bit on the better side. It lets its Volt Switches hit a little bit harder, its Scalds hit a little bit harder. If you happen to be running Signal Beam or Dazzling Gleam or Ice Beam or something along those lines, Lanturn gets a decent amount of coverage moves. 86 special attack is indeed better than 76 and actually lets it sort of put a little bit more pressure on an opponent. As far as its abilities go, again, I mentioned Water Absorb and Volt Absorb are two very solid abilities. Again, Water Absorb can basically just stop a physical or special attacking water type in its tracks, as well as Volt Absorb. It's being a water type that has an immunity to electric type moves is very, very unique, pretty much just to Lanturn, and I don't want to change either of those abilities for it. But I did want to change Illuminate for Hydration. Now, Illuminate has no effect in battle. It basically just makes wild Pokemon more common in the overworld, and that's great and all, but it doesn't help Lanturn competitively at all. So, I wanted to change Illuminate to Hydration. Now, what Hydration does is it actually lets Lanturn heal off status in the rain, and this kind of comes with a few different assumptions for Lanturn now. Lanturn being an electric type, if you're running Lanturn on a rain team for whatever reason, it means that its Scalds hit harder, it means that its Thunders are 100% accurate, they can never miss, as well as if you happen to be running a rest set or a Chesto rest set, if you click rest and you're in the rain, Hydration will make it so that your sleep status is automatically healed, and then you have 100% of your HP left, which gives Lanturn full recovery if it's in the rain, gives it a little bit of a niche over certain other water types in the rain, as well as lets Lanturn function a little bit differently. It kind of reminds me of Fion a little bit, but obviously much, much better. As far as its moves go, I want to give Lanturn access to Muddy Water. I want to give Lantern access to Flip Turn as well as Nuzzle. Now the two big ones here, Flip Turn, obviously it's a water type pivot move. I think that even though Lantern's base attack is 58, it gives Lantern a different option to actually switch out of Pokemon, especially even ground types that might come in to trap Lantern. If you want to run Flip Turn and Volt Switch at the same time, you can kind of pick and choose which one you're going to use to pivot. Nuzzle as well, it means that it can hit a Pokemon, paralyze it, and then potentially outspeed it the next turn and click a super effective move against it, maybe Scald, maybe Ice Beam, maybe Thunderbolt, or Discharge or something like that. As far as coverage moves, Lantern is indeed based on an Anglerfish. I thought it would be an interesting option to give it some special attacking ground type moves. Nothing like Earth Power, but mostly moves that just have to do with the Deep Sea, with Mud, Mud Slap, Mud Shot, Mud Bomb. It's not really going to make or break Lantern, but it does give it some options versus other electric types. If you're opting to run Volt Absorb, you can then, maybe hit Mud Bomb back at like a Jolteon or a Raikou or something like that, and do pretty decently against those type of Pokemon. As far as setup and support goes, I want to give Lantern access to Life Dew, Magnet Rise, Ion Deluge, Electrify, and most notably, Defog. Now, I think it makes sense for Lantern to have access to Defog as a support Pokemon. It's a Lantern. That's quite literally what a Lantern does. I shouldn't even have to explain why I think that it makes sense that a Pokemon who illuminates the sea and the sky is able to defog an area. I think it's kind of strange that it never got it before, but I digress. The Pokemon Company is going to do whatever it does. This gives Lantern a absolute ton of options to run. If you want to run, a Life Dew set with leftovers, it might not be the best thing in the world as far as recovery, but it does indeed increase your recovery over time. I want to give Lantern access to Magnet Rise, which would basically mean that if it clicks Magnet Rise ahead of other ground type Pokemon, it basically walls ground types at that point. It can just start slamming Scalds, start slamming maybe Dazzling Gleam, Signal Beams, whatever it might have, Ice Beams for those ground type Pokemon. As well as two different ways to pivot, Flip Turn, Volt Switch. You can run Lantern as a water type counter, as a Pokemon that's going to kind of get in the way in the rain, as well as have support, as well as maybe an electric type counter with its newfound access to ground type moves. I think that this gives Lantern a nice niche over a Pokemon like Rotom Wash, who previously completely outclassed it. Specifically having the ability to defog, whereas Rotom could also defog, really helps Lantern, especially considering that it has a higher HP and special attack stat to capitalize off of the time it actually spends on the field. And that about does it for part 2 of rebalancing Johto. Keep in mind, guys, these type of videos are indeed just for fun. If you have any ideas about how you personally would balance these Pokemon, be sure to leave a comment. I love talking about it. You'll find me in the discussion, talking about what I've done, what you guys might do, that sort of thing. Also, if you haven't left a like, comment, or subscribed yet, be sure to do so. All the support goes a very long way to help myself as well as the channel as a whole, and gets these type of videos on your table, on your screen, and gets these type of videos on your screen a little bit more often. So, click that like button if you haven't already. Sorry about this one taking a little bit longer. I had some issues recording the audio for it. I literally got through an entire recording session of it, as well as then realized that my microphone was turned off, and I was like, all right. So it took me a little bit to kind of regain the ability to come back and re-record it, just because I didn't want to have to do it again. I didn't really have time to do it again, but here it is. So I'm going to get out of here. Thank you all for watching, and till next time.